The heat was a living thing. It shimmered in waves off the cracked asphalt of the gas station, a lonely outpost on a forgotten stretch of highway that connected nowhere to nothing. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, baked into submission by the relentless sun. For Sergeant Marcus Thorne, the world had felt slow for a long time. Each movement was deliberate, a negotiation between his will and the unyielding ache in his joints, a ghost limb that still screamed in the night, and the finely tuned piece of carbon fiber and steel that now served as his left leg. He was leaning against his old, rust-pocked Ford pickup, the nozzle of the gas pump in his hand, the rhythmic click-clack of the numbers ticking upwards, a familiar mundane sound in the oppressive silence. In the truck bed, lying on a worn military blanket, were his two shadows, his anchors, his reasons. Thor, a magnificent German shepherd, was a statue of sable fur and alert ears, his amber eyes missing nothing. Beside him, Luna, a golden retriever the color of spun honey, rested her head on her paws, but her tail gave a soft, intermittent thump-thump-thump against the metal, a constant reassurance of her presence. Then the silence was shattered. A low rumble at first, a vibration felt more in the chest than heard with the ears. It grew into a deafening roar as a pack of motorcycles crested the hill, chrome glinting viciously in the sun. They were a vision of leather, steel, and defiance, and they swarmed into the gas station like angry hornets, their engines popping and snarling before falling into a rumbling, menacing idle. There were 5 of them, all large men with the kind of hardened faces that told stories of bar fights and long, hard miles. Their leader, a man with a shaved head and a thick, braided beard, swung his leg over his bike. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, and a tattoo of a coiled serpent snaked up his neck. He pulled off his sunglasses, and his eyes, small and hard as river stones, immediately landed on Marcus. A slow, cruel smirk spread across his face. He nudged the biker next to him, a younger man with a nervous energy, and gestured with his chin. "Well, well, look what we got here, boys. A real-life hero." The words were laced with a venom so potent it seemed to poison the air. They started to circle him, their heavy boots scuffing on the gritty pavement. They mocked his limp. They laughed at the faded Marine Corps sticker on his bumper. Marcus said nothing. He kept his eyes on the gas pump, his jaw tight, his shoulders squared. He'd faced down men with far worse intentions than this. He just wanted to fill his tank and go. But it was the dogs that signaled the true shift in the atmosphere. Luna, the gentle retriever, stopped her tail thumping. She pressed her body low against the truck bed, a soft, anxious whine escaping her throat, a sound only Marcus could truly interpret. It was the sound of his own rising heartbeat, his own ragged breath mirrored back at him, and Thor did something far more terrifying than bark or growl. He rose to his feet in one fluid, silent motion. He didn't make a sound. He simply stood there, perfectly still, his body a rigid line of condensed power. His intelligent eyes locked onto the leader, whose name he would later learn was Spike. It wasn't a stare of aggression. It was a stare of assessment, of judgment. A silent, unnerving promise that a line was being drawn, and they were dangerously close to crossing it. No one understood what was happening. Why was this magnificent animal so unnaturally still? What was he waiting for? The bikers saw a dog, but Marcus saw a guardian holding the gate. What happened next would not only silence the entire gas station, but would reveal a truth so profound it would change everyone who witnessed it. Stay with us, because this story is a powerful reminder that heroes come in all forms, and courage isn't about the noise you make, but the stand you take. Before we dive in, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And I'm always curious, where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. It's incredible to see how far these stories of courage travel. The gas pump clicked off, the sudden silence amplifying the tension. Marcus carefully removed the nozzle, his movements economical, practiced. He twisted the gas cap back on, the metallic screech grating in the quiet. He could feel their eyes on him, a physical weight. He could smell the stale beer and sweat and cheap leather. "What's the matter, old man?" one of them sneered, a lanky biker with a tattoo of a skull on his forearm. "Cat got your tongue?" Spike, the leader, took a step closer, his shadow falling over Marcus. He was deliberately invading his space, a classic intimidation tactic. "We're just being friendly, paying our respects to a veteran." Again, that poisonous sarcasm. He gestured towards the dogs. "Nice pets. What are they for? You get lonely out here on the road? They gonna lick us to death?" Another one laughed, a wheezing, unpleasant sound. Marcus finally looked up, his gaze meeting Spike's. His eyes were a startlingly clear blue, eyes that had seen too much. They held no fear, only a deep, profound weariness. "They're not pets," he said, his voice quiet but firm, a low rumble that carried surprising authority. "And I'm just trying to get on my way. No trouble here, gentlemen." He was trying to be humble, to de-escalate. He was offering them an out, a chance to walk away and let this be nothing more than a moment of ugly posturing. But Spike wasn't interested in de-escalation. He was looking for a target, a place to pour the poison that was clearly eating him alive from the inside. His eyes dropped to Marcus's leg, the prosthetic visible below the cuff of his worn jeans. "Lost that playing hero, did ya?" Spike's voice was a low growl, now the pretense of mockery gone, replaced by something raw and jagged. "What happened? Couldn't run fast enough from the big, bad bogeyman." The words hit Marcus like shrapnel. The sun-drenched gas station flickered. For a split second, it wasn't asphalt beneath his feet, but scorching sand. The smell of gasoline was replaced by the acrid stench of cordite. The lazy drone of a cicada became the high-pitched scream of incoming fire. His hand shot out, gripping the cool metal of the truck's side to steady himself. His breath hitched. Luna saw it. Or rather, she sensed it. The subtle shift in his posture, the scent of adrenaline and cortisol flooding his system. Her low whine intensified, and she began to nudge a small, olive-drab duffel bag in the corner of the truck bed. Her nose pushed at it insistently, desperately. She knew what was coming. She knew what he needed. Inside the small convenience store, a young cashier with acne and terrified eyes watched through the grimy window. His hand hovered over the phone, but he was frozen. These weren't local troublemakers. They were something else, a storm that had blown in off the highway, and he was just a sapling in its path. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, forcing the desert back into the prison of his memory. He took a slow, deep breath, a technique a therapist had taught him years ago. In through the nose, hold for 4, out through the mouth. When he opened his eyes, the gas station was back. But the threat was still there, closer now. He tried to move towards the driver's side door. It was only 10 feet away, but it felt like a mile. Spike mirrored his movement, blocking his path. The other 4 spread out, a loose, intimidating semicircle. They were penning him in. "We're not done talking to you, soldier," Spike said, crossing his thick arms over his chest. His knuckles were white. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was a man teetering on the edge of something dangerous. It was the youngest biker, the one Spike had called Rook, who finally pushed things too far. He was full of a nervous bravado, trying to prove himself to the others. He looked at Luna, the retriever, who seemed the less threatening of the 2 dogs. A soft, pretty dog whimpering in the back of a truck. An easy target. "Aw, is a little doggy scared?" Rook cooed in a mocking voice. He reached a hand over the side of the truck bed, his fingers wiggling. "Here, doggy, doggy, come on, girl, I don't bite." It happened so fast it was almost impossible to process. The moment Rook's fingers breached the invisible perimeter of the truck bed, Luna's entire being transformed. The whimpering, anxious creature vanished. In her place was a highly trained, mission-focused operative. She didn't lunge. She didn't snarl. She didn't even show her teeth. She simply let out one single explosive bark. It wasn't a sound of fear or aggression. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated command. It was a drill sergeant's roar, a judge's gavel, a thunderclap in a silent room all rolled into one. It was so sharp, so loud, so full of absolute authority that it shocked the very air. Every single person, bikers included, flinched back. Rook snatched his hand away as if he'd touched a live wire, his face pale. The birds that had been chirping in a nearby tree fell silent, and on that signal, Thor moved. There was no frantic scramble, no wild leap. It was a display of breathtaking power and grace. He launched himself from the truck bed, a silent, sable missile. He sailed over the side and landed on the asphalt with a soft thud, his paws absorbing the impact without a sound. He didn't charge Spike. He didn't rush him. He simply materialized between the biker leader and Marcus, placing his body squarely in the path. He stood there, head up, chest out, a living barrier of muscle, fur, and unwavering loyalty. And he just looked up at Spike. He didn't growl. His lip didn't curl. His tail was still. But the intensity in his gaze was a force of nature. It was a silent, eloquent statement that said more than any snarl ever could, "This far and no further. You will not pass. You will not touch him." The bikers were stunned into a collective, disbelieving silence. They had seen angry dogs, vicious dogs, scared dogs. They had never seen anything like this. This wasn't animal instinct, this was discipline, this was training. This was something they couldn't comprehend. The sheer, quiet confidence of the animal was more intimidating than any overt display of aggression could ever be. It was the calm of a professional who knows exactly what they are capable of and has no need to prove it with empty threats. Marcus let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He placed a hand on Thor's broad head, a small, grounding gesture. He finally had his voice back, and it was steady, clear, and devoid of fear. "I told you," he said, his voice cutting through the thick tension. "They're not pets." He looked at the stunned faces around him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something other than contempt. It was confusion. It was a dawning, grudging respect. "They're my partners." He decided, then and there, they deserved to know. Not for his sake, but for the sake of the two magnificent animals who were his constant guardians. "That was not an attack," he explained, his voice taking on the tone of a patient instructor. "That was a warning, a communication. Luna's bark was an alert. Thor's movement was an interception. It's called blocking. He's trained to place his body between me and a perceived threat to create space and de-escalate a situation without making physical contact." He pointed a slightly trembling finger back towards the truck bed, where Luna was once again insistently nudging the olive-drab bag. "And her? She's not just a pretty face. She's a medical alert and PTSD response dog. A few minutes ago, when you were crowding me, she smelled it on me. The chemical change, the spike in my cortisol levels. She knew a severe anxiety attack or a flashback was imminent." He walked over to the truck, Thor moving with him like a shadow, and picked up the bag Luna had been so focused on. He unzipped it, revealing not tools or supplies, but a meticulously organized medical kit. She was trying to tell me to take my medication, to ground myself. She was doing her job, a job she has done countless times, a job that has, on more than one occasion, literally saved my life. The revelation hung in the hot, still air. These weren't just well-behaved dogs. They were specialists. They were extensions of Marcus himself, living, breathing biosensors tuned to his specific needs, protectors of his body and his mind. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. The mockery had evaporated, replaced by a strange, unsettling awe. They were looking at a level of loyalty and intelligence that dwarfed their own brutish posturing. They had come looking for a weak man to bully and had instead found a warrior with guardians more disciplined than any soldier they had ever known. Spike, however, was trapped by his own pride. He had instigated this. He was the leader. To back down now would be to lose face in front of his men. He puffed out his chest, a desperate attempt to reclaim his shattered authority. "So what?" he scoffed, but his voice was brittle, lacking the conviction it held just minutes before. "They're just a couple of mutts doing tricks you taught 'em. Doesn't make you any less of a broken-down cripple." The insult was pathetic, a last-ditch effort from a man who knew he had lost control of the situation. It was a desperate, ugly jab, and everyone knew it. But it was still a challenge, a line drawn in the sand. Spike squared his shoulders and took one aggressive step forward, aiming to shove past the unmoving dog and get in Marcus's face, to reassert his physical dominance. It was the final mistake. It was the move that would unravel everything. As Spike surged forward, a wave of raw aggression rolling off him, everyone expected Thor to react in kind. A snarl, a lunge, a snap of powerful jaws. That's what a guard dog would do. That's what any normal animal would do when faced with a direct, physical threat to its master. But Thor was not a normal animal. He did not lunge. He did not growl. He did something so profoundly unexpected, so utterly baffling that it stopped Spike dead in his tracks. As the biker moved, Thor lowered his head slightly, his ears softening. He let out a low, soft whine, a sound completely different from any he had made before. It wasn't a sound of fear or warning. It was a sound of concern, of empathy. And then he gently, deliberately nudged Spike's leather jacket with his wet nose right over the man's heart. He held it there for a second, a soft, insistent pressure. The bikers stared, their mouths agape. What on earth was the dog doing? Was this another trick? A sign of submission? It made no sense. But Marcus saw it, and in an instant everything clicked into place. His own hypervigilance, a curse from the battlefield, had become a strange kind of gift. It allowed him to see the cracks in people, the fault lines of pain they tried so desperately to hide. He looked at Spike, truly looked at him, past the tattoos and the leather and the rage. He saw the flicker of deep, bottomless sorrow in the man's eyes. He saw the tension in his jaw that wasn't just anger, but a desperate effort to hold back a flood of grief. Thor hadn't sensed a physical threat in that final step. He had sensed a breaking heart. His training wasn't just about perceiving physical danger. It was about reading human emotion in its rawest form. He was trained to comfort, to ground, to connect with a human in distress. And the man in the most distress at that gas station was not Marcus. It was Spike. With a sudden, piercing clarity, Marcus knew what he had to do. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't issue a threat. He met the biker's furious, confused gaze and asked a simple, quiet question. His voice filled not with anger, but with a gentle, heart-breaking compassion. "Who did you lose?" The 4 words struck Spike with the force of a physical blow. The air went out of his lungs. The rage, the pride, the entire carefully constructed fortress of his persona crumbled into dust. His face, which had been a mask of intimidating fury, contorted with a grief so raw and powerful it was terrifying to witness. His eyes, those hard river stones, filled with tears that began to trace clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. He staggered back a step, his hand flying to the spot on his chest that Thor had just touched. as if the dog's gentle nudge had unlocked a sealed chamber of pain. With a shaking hand, he fumbled with the zipper of his leather jacket, pulling it down. Underneath, he wore a faded black t-shirt, and on that t-shirt, tattooed directly over his heart, was the crest of the 101st Airborne Division. Beneath it were a name and a set of dates. PFC Danny Rook Jensen, 1990-2011, Kandahar. "My brother," Spike choked out, the words ragged, torn from his soul. "My little brother. He never came home. They sent him back in a box." He looked at Marcus, his eyes pleading, searching for something he couldn't name. "Afghanistan. Same damn place." The truth landed with the weight of a tombstone. It was all there. The mocking nickname he'd given the younger biker, Rook, the same as his brother's. The explosive, misdirected rage. It wasn't about Marcus's prosthetic leg or his veteran status. It was because of it. Spike looked at Marcus, a man who had survived the very place that had stolen his brother, and his grief had twisted itself into a monstrous, ugly resentment. He wasn't lashing out at a stranger, he was screaming at a ghost, at a fate that he saw as profoundly unfair. His pride was never strength, it was a shield, and a fragile one at that, protecting a wound that had never been allowed to heal. This was the moment of grace. Marcus, the man who had been mocked, threatened, and cornered, had every right to be angry. He had every right to call the police, to press charges, to walk away with his head held high. But he did none of those things. He saw a fellow traveler in the landscape of grief. He saw a man drowning, and he refused to let him go under. He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Thor stayed by his side, a silent, comforting presence. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcus said, and the sincerity in his voice was absolute. There was no pity, only a shared, sacred understanding. "I am truly, deeply sorry." The other bikers were frozen, witnessing the complete emotional dismantling of their leader. They looked from Spike's tear-streaked face to Marcus's calm, compassionate expression, to the incredible dog who had started it all. The shame was rolling off them in palpable waves. They had been party to something cruel and ugly, and they had been blind to the reason why. They saw their leader not as a fearsome outlaw, but as a broken man, and their respect for him somehow deepened in that moment of vulnerability. Spike finally broke. A strangled sob escaped his lips, and he covered his face with his hands, his broad shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," he wept, the words muffled. "Man, I'm so sorry. I see you, and all I can see is him. I see you standing here, and all I can think is why you? Why not him?" It was the question that haunts every survivor, the raw, brutal heart of survivor's guilt. Marcus nodded slowly, his own eyes glistening. "I know," he whispered. "Believe me, I know the feeling. I ask myself that every single day." He gestured to his dogs. "These two, they're the only reason I'm still here. They pull me out of the darkness when it gets too deep. They remind me that my watch isn't over, that I still have a purpose." He spoke of the invisible wounds, the ones that don't bleed but can kill you just the same. He spoke of service, not just as a duty performed on the battlefield, but as a calling to help others navigate the wars they fight within themselves. He had been given a gift of survival, and his stewardship of that gift was to show grace to others who were still lost in the wreckage. What happened next was a quiet miracle on the sun-scorched asphalt of a forgotten gas station. The standoff was over, the animosity gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative peace. One by one, the other bikers moved, not with menace, but with a clumsy, hesitant desire to make amends. The one who had laughed about the dogs licking them to death walked into the store and came back with a cold bottle of water, which he offered to Marcus. "Sir," he mumbled, unable to meet his eyes. Rook, the young biker who had triggered the whole event, knelt and gently checked the tire pressure on Marcus's old truck, his movements meticulous and respectful. Another biker wordlessly began to wash the dust and grime from his windshield with a squeegee from the pump island. They were small acts, simple gestures, but they were acts of penance, of humility. They were an apology spoken in deeds, not words. Spike finally composed himself, wiping his eyes on the sleeve of his jacket. He looked at Marcus, his face raw, stripped of all its former arrogance. "Your dogs, they're incredible." "Their family," Marcus corrected gently. Spike extended a trembling hand. "My name is Frank," he said. "Nobody's called me that in 20 years. Marcus took the offered hand. The grip was firm, a connection between two men who had met as adversaries and were parting as something else entirely. "Marcus Thorne," he replied. "It's an honor to meet you, Frank." There was nothing more to say. The apology had been made, and forgiveness had been granted without condition. Marcus opened his truck door and prepared to leave. Thor and Luna hopped back into the truck bed, resuming their positions on the blanket as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. As Marcus pulled out of the gas station, the old Ford rumbling back to life, he glanced in his rearview mirror. The bikers weren't jeering or laughing. They were standing in a silent group, watching him go. And Frank, formerly Spike, raised a hand in a slow, solemn farewell. It wasn't the wave of a biker. It was the quiet, respectful salute of a man acknowledging a brother. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the vast, empty sky in hues of orange and gold. The light streamed through the dusty rear window, bathing Thor and Luna in a warm, ethereal glow. They were his guardian angels, cloaked in fur, their love unconditional, their intuition a divine gift. We live in a world that is so quick to judge. We see a man with a prosthetic leg and we see weakness. We see a man covered in leather and tattoos and we see a threat. We build walls around our hearts and lob insults over them, never stopping to ask what battles a person on the other side is fighting. Today, at a lonely gas station, those walls came down. They were brought down not by fists or by anger, but by the profound, intuitive wisdom of an animal who could see past the surface to the truth of a man's soul. Thor didn't see a bully, he saw a brother in mourning. And Marcus, in his quiet dignity, chose humility over pride, compassion over anger. He chose to serve the very man who had mocked his sacrifice. It's a powerful lesson in the quiet strength of forgiveness, a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of courage is to offer a hand to the person who just tried to strike you. True strength isn't the absence of wounds. It's what you do with your scars. As Marcus drove into the sunset, he knew he would never forget the man named Frank. And Frank would never forget the veteran and his two incredible partners, who taught him that the deepest grief can be met with the most unexpected grace, and that sometimes the path to redemption begins with the gentle nudge of a dog's nose. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story. If it touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the good in the world. Until next time, look for the heroes. They are all around you.